Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Crowdfundr Roundtable Discussions. My name is Jeff Robertson, aka Simon Maggots on Instagram, and I'll be your host today. Now, if you are a maker or publisher of comics and you feel like you have something to say, we want to hear from you. Get in touch with us through Crowdfundr's official Instagram or Twitter account, and we can talk about getting you on a future episode. Now, without further ado, let's get to today's discussion. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the third episode of the Crowdfundr Roundtable Discussions. It's our Canadian Creator Spotlight. I'm Canadian. Everyone else in the room here is all Canadian. And there's even some cool Canada-centric projects being done by some of the cool Canadians that are in the room today. So let's start off with Jason and Chris, introduce yourself. Tell us about what you guys do at Group of Seven Comics.
Sure. Yeah. So, hey, we're Group of Seven Comics, and we put out comic books, action, adventure, historical fiction comics with featured tales of daring, danger, the unbelievable, and the unknown. Is what we do. And so we mash up elements of Canadian history and art and pop culture with our favorite storytelling devices, whether it's our favorite films or comics, whatever it happens to be. Mash it all up into a whole bunch of goodness called Group of Seven Comics. Jason, what do you think?
And we've been making comics, publishing them since 2017, and it's been a really fun roller coaster ride. Just going up that first hill so far for the last few years, and it's been a blast. We've met lots of cool people, other great creators, and really learned a lot, through printing, now up to about 11 books, and wow. It's been a blast.
That's great.
Yeah.
And Conan, you are a publisher, and you run a magazine. Tell us about that.
I did until recently. I'm the executive director of Doug Wright Awards, which is an organization founded in 2005 that supports and promotes Canadian comics. We do an annual awards ceremony every year. And up until recently, I was the editor and publisher of a magazine called Tattle Creek for 25 years. Just wrapped up our run last fall, and with a crowdfunded book collection. And it was kind of an indie arts magazine that published fiction, poetry, comics, and a variety of other things.
That's great. Now, we've all been since 2017. That's 6 years ago already, and I feel like now that we've all been in it for a few years, we all have projects on Crowdfundr right now. Actually, before we get going, what's everybody have on Crowdfundr right now? What's waiting to be funded or funded already?
Well, our printing of Group of Seven, A Most Secret Tale, which collects the first 6 issues of our series, we sold our printing out, and we need to do a new one. So we thought about some things we could, modify in terms of just new presentation, new cover, new format, and loads of new content, especially in the back matter. And so we wanted to have a new edition of this ready to go for the convention season and moving forward for schools and libraries and comic shops and for fun readers like you. So this is the original edition that we printed in 2020, which, by the way, was a great year to come up with a big project to have at all the conventions that are about to get canceled. Good timing, but there you go. But we sold out anyway, so it worked out.
And what was their initial print run for the first?
It was 500, which we had, bumped up against a few times with several of the issues, and we were kind of learning what our market was and what threshold we thought we could meet. And we had, heard from so many either stores or buyers that they're waiting for the trade. They're waiting for the trade. So we thought, okay, we can do 500. And luckily, with support of a few really great comic stores who bought large numbers from us, and a couple school orders as well, and then just lugging them to different shows across the Greater Toronto area and to Montreal and to Bethesda, Maryland, or Washington, D.C., depending on your point of view. We were able to sell enough copies to finish our run.
That's great. Yeah, Conan, what do you have on Crowdfundr currently?
Currently, the Doug Wright Awards are funding a book called The Collected Doug Wright, Volume 2. Doug Wright, who the awards are named after, was a Canadian cartoonist across several decades, back in the days of magazine comic strips, newspaper comic strips. He retired in 1980, but his strip, Doug Wright's Family, which is also known as Nipper, is considered just one of the greatest Canadian comic strips of all time, which is why we chose him as for our name. And so we published Volume 1 with Toronto Quarterly back in 2009, I think, and we've been planning for years to do a Volume 2. We decided to do this one ourselves, so we're crowdfunding that right now. I think we're at 81% of our goal. It's a couple weeks left. I think we'll be okay, and it's something we've wanted to do for a long time, just to complete the set and just have a nice tribute to him out there, both for his memory and for his family, and just as a part. We just feel it's an important part of Canadian comics history.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've also got a book that's just on its way back as well. So as I mentioned, I wrapped up my magazine Tattle Creek last year. So we just about a year ago we raised for this one. It was just a book of pieces from our 25 years, and we successfully fundraised for that, and it's on the boat on its way to us right now.
Ooh, that's exciting. Yeah, no, actually, one thing that I'll ask is, because we're all Canadian, there's a lot of different hurdles that we have to go through to publish and distribute and print comics than people in the States. There's not as many options, at least in terms of the shipping costs and various other things that we have to deal with. There's a lot of big distributors that are all based in America and whatnot. What have been some of the challenges in putting these projects together, and how did you overcome them?
I think for us, just getting started, like knowing the landscape, what kind of printer prints comics. I know there's the internet, you can always just ask, but in terms of knowing the quality of the work and the reliability of printers, so our approach was to gather data first, and we went to TCAF on a data gathering mission. So Chris, you had written a script already, or a draft of the script, for 6 issues of our series, and we went to TCAF and just looked to see who we could shake hands with, who we could talk to that would give us the time of day, and if anyone would be willing to look over some of your work that you had, Chris, and give us any pointers. And we attended as many panels as we could to, again, just get a sense of who the players were in the community in Toronto. What stores were more supportive or less supportive of indie cartoonists, and were there other comics out there like ours? We had no idea what it was going to be. So really just going and hanging out together at these kinds of events in Toronto was a huge help for us. And the people we met that day helped us find the first printer that we used, and have helped definitely me along the way with the craft of cartooning. It was a really beneficial trip to TCAF.
Yeah, we learned about bleeds.
It took me a long time
when it comes to printing. Yeah, we're very the whole journey for us has been about reaching out, learning from the community, and just trying to get that data and info gather so that we can put ourselves in the best possible position to succeed. And that's in all aspects of what we do. So not only are we reaching out to creators at the beginning, at least for sure, for feedback on a product that I had never written fiction. Jay, you had never published art. I mean, we had both. I published nonfiction. You had taught art, but those are different things. And so like all these pieces. So we sought out creators to provide feedback, and who have become our friends and our colleagues and our peers, which is pretty amazing. And then like the printing thing, the marketing thing through social media, all of it, how do you design a website, or even, what tools or which website which services, what do you like, what don't you like, like price points, like everything. So
Right.
we just kind of been, and to Jason's point, yeah, we went with one printer. Then about 4 issues in, we heard about another one, and someone had mentioned this, and so it was a little more local, and so it was actually easier for us to pick up, and then we could reduce costs. And yeah, just like it, just I mean, you want to continuously improve and move things forward. So that's kind of that was always our pitch to people who come up to us and say, "How do you start?" Because we're at a table and it's been 5 years or 6 years, and the answer we always give is that we reached out, we engaged with the community, and the community has been incredibly helpful. And so
Right.
to be part of that again is kind of coming full circle at least. And we're always still learning, by the way. I mean, we still have so much to grow in. So yeah.
For me, there was also a huge part about the meaning behind some of our choices. So, what is the implication of this kind of paper versus that kind of paper on the reading experience? What is it communicating? What are our choices that I have never made before? What are they going to mean to people who are reading this message that we're sending out there? I mean, something as tactile as how is it interpreted differently if I use a brush or a pen? Right? What's the weight going to be? What art am I referencing more this way or that way? What previous experiences do the readers have with this or with that? And I wasn't sure what anything was going to mean. So then you have to eventually try, see what works, and then make an adjustment as you go. And also just follow your fancy,
And the physical weight too, by the way. I know you weren't talking,
Right.
about that, but the actual weight, like for shipping, because Jeff, you mentioned shipping, and so there's that like breaking point. And if we're using Canada Post up here to Canada, I mean, we can use other means, Chit Chats, a whole bunch of other carriers that can help out. But if you're using like straight up Canada Post, like at what point do their price points jump based on weight? Right. And like if we can fit that into an envelope, like does that adjust our approach to printing? Right. So it's like all those little bits, right? All those little bits.
And do you remember, Chris, those first issues, like
the
covers were curling?
Oh yeah, so much.
Right.
Yeah.
And I wanted something a little heavier and, coated or non-coated, or, I mean, like, oh, come on. I didn't know what any of it was going to mean, how it would be interpreted. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I've been in the business for a while, so a lot of the printing stuff I knew about. I've published magazines and newspapers and comic books for years. I'd never done a book before, so that was a bit of a learning curve for me because that's a very different thing from printing periodicals. Thankfully, I had some friends in the industry that had done it that I could go to for advice. So that was a pretty quick hurdle for me to get over. But I mean, as Jason and Chris know, I mean, well, for me, the two hardest things were, one, I'd never done a crowdfunding campaign before, didn't know a thing about it. I mean, I knew what it was and how it worked, but I just getting over that hurdle to actually start. And, thankfully, I had a friend in the publisher at Black Eye Books who'd been using Crowdfundr for a while, and he kind of recommended it and held my hand a bit through the first one I did. And, David, the president of Crowdfundr, was really helpful in answering a lot of questions and just, offering me advice on how the campaign should work. I probably made a few little mistakes in the first one that corrected in the second one, nothing major. But that was a big hurdle. But I mean, the hardest part for me is just, and as Jason and Chris know, is the work of actually doing the campaign, because it's not a matter of just putting it up and waiting for the money to roll in. You got to keep at it. Work. It's actual work, and so it's not that it's hard, but you have to do it. Want to do it, you have to know how to do it. You have to keep it fresh every day. You have to really push it without annoying people, and you have to really keep at it and not get discouraged, because you're going to get. Everyone knows there's going to be a lot the first day or so. It's going to go down. Maybe it'll come up at the end, but you got to do what you can in the middle to keep the money coming in. And I was really lucky with Tattle Creek. It was a product that had been around for 25 years. I had a 23-year-old mailing list. I had a dozen years of social media followers. I had subscribers. So that actually, I was still a little worried about whether it would get funded, but it did. With the Doug Wright book, even though people know the name because of our organization, we're pushing a book of cartoons by a guy that most people under 40 don't know, never heard of. So it's really a matter of pitching why this is an important project, and if you're a fan of Canadian comics, especially if you like Canadian comics history, getting through to people and letting them know that this guy's an important part of that industry. So if that's of interest to you, you might like this. But it's constant work, and that's really for me the hardest part is just reaching people, figuring out other ways to reach people. We obviously have our own avenues with social media, email, and our own contacts, but getting other people, like other cartoonists, we've got some American cartoonists who really love Doug Wright, and getting them to pitch it out to other people and spread the word that way. So it's about finding as many avenues as possible, spread the word. Even when I did my Talon Creek book, I just used every avenue I could possibly think of, every contact I had, and just told everyone about it to get the word out. And it's work, but hopefully it pays off in the end. You get your product.
Yeah, absolutely. And there can't be too much said for how helpful it can be to have other people boosting your campaign. That could make the difference.
Yeah, for sure. It's helped us for sure. We've had a couple people that have pitched it, and I've seen the numbers go up as soon as they've written about it. I'm positive that it had an influence for sure.
Conan, I think it's hilarious. I laughed because when you said, I think Jay and I both, when you said Michelle, you reached out to Michelle, because we also reached out to Michelle. He's like, Jeff, I hope there's a podcast with Michelle talking about how to run a successful crowdfunder, because the guy was
should
just
be episode 1.
Right. It's a good point.
He actually taught me something that you mentioned as well. Chit chat for mailing, which just completely changes, because like when you have an expensive our book's like $40. If you're going to add $20-25 to that, that's a turnoff for some people. But if you can get it down, and things like chit chat, third-party mailing services are a lot cheaper than Canada Post. And if you can get that postage price down, that's really important to selling the book, because as an add-on to the price, that can be a bit of a turnoff when people actually get to the page where they have to pay. And he was the one that got me into that. So yeah, he should have his own podcast entirely. He should have his own.
This is our first crowdfunder too, as well. This is our first time just going through it. Like, we had done like a pre-order type thing for the first printing, and we just reached out to like friends and contacts who we knew, and we funded it that way, which was great. People like using a Google spreadsheet, right? Like very e-transfers, like what was at our disposal. We kicked the tires on the Kickstarter, we kicked the tires on their fundraisers, and then eventually last year we learned more about Crowdfunder and have had conversations and things. And so with the Canadian creators coming up, it was just like, oh, let's try this out. And it's been you're 81%. Yeah, that's awesome. That's amazing. So like,
I haven't checked in 10 minutes. Maybe it's gone up.
Maybe it's gone up. Yeah. I jokingly will always, I'll check it, the emails come in, and then I'll send Jason. We're at 84 as of right now. So we're both in a good spot, which is fantastic. But I'll just get it. I'll just text him like 84, 85, 86.
Chris, I get the messages too.
Oh, I know you do, but I assume that you don't look at them. So I just
Yeah, so how long have the campaign's been running now?
Ours has been up for about, it'd be 3 weeks tomorrow.
Nice.
I think mine's about the same. I did a 5-week campaign for this one. Just I felt we were going to need a few extra days, and I wanted to get it going before TCAF, the Toronto Comic Art Festival here, and have some time after it, so people, because we were handing out promos and stuff at TCAF, wanted to give people a few days to recover from TCAF and look at it and go and fund it. So so I think we've got 12 days left or so.
Similar thinking for us. We're holding on till the end of the month, but we were also wanted to have something before TCAF and some time after TCAF. By the way, Conan, where were you tabling at TCAF? What room or what space were you in?
By the horrible men's room on the first floor.
Ooh.
Class. Oh yeah, great.
Like down that right at the bottom of the stairs there, where you go to the
when you're going over to the smaller area, there's Toronto's worst men's room.
Is it? You've taken a survey.
just based on what I've seen. Yeah.
Observations. That's all.
I'm not criticizing that it has a needle disposal thing inside, but it's very indicative.
Right.
What's going on?
We were upstairs on the second floor in the salon, and it was not an easy room for people to get into as they were touring around the event. There was often like a lineup for the space. I'd love to think the lineup was there because of us, But that's not factual
Like
at
that.
all. That's
It's like that every
you
year.
know,
That's the one room they really have to pay attention to fire code for, and they're really very careful of how many people.
that's right. And of course, the fire alarm did go off on
Yes.
Sunday
Yeah.
while we were in there. But I'm always worried that people are discouraged by the lineup. For this free event, they don't want to take the time to line up for 10 or 15 minutes outside. But it was the space was very vibrant. A lot of amazing, beautiful looking products for people to buy that were in there. But I didn't peruse the rest of the event at all. So I didn't get to the men's room, B, the tables on the first floor. I missed out. I feel bad, but
Good stuff.
Now, out of the various Canadian shows, like TCAF is really good. I wasn't able to make it this year, but have there been other ones that you've done that you found were really good? Because I think the thing about Canada is we have so much talent, and it's a large country, but there is a pretty small percentage of us that are producing the work in comparison to our neighbors down south. There's just a lot more that we have to compete against, so I think that in general, a lot of people are aware of a lot of the American indie conventions and conventions, but what have been some of the cool Canadian ones we've been to?
we went to MCAF for the first time last year, to the
Ooh.
Montreal Comic Arts Festival, or Festival Bande Dessinée of Montréal. And Chris and
Your French is so good.
Today it's because I've been drinking wine, and so I'm just relaxed. We had a great time, if I can speak on your behalf there, Chris, and I can't wait to get back there at the end of this month. It should be a blast. But that's the only time we've been outside of the GTA for an event. And yeah, I would recommend anyone who wants to have a great time in Montreal at a comics event like the MCAF is fantastic.
Yeah, we've been fortunate enough to there's a number of smaller shows around the GTA for sure, and a lot of the libraries have jumped on, right, having their own caps, which we often find very attractive to us because there's either like no table fee or very minimal table fee, and also because the product that we have, kind of as we mentioned in the intro, kind of involves so many elements, especially the Canadian history piece and the education piece, and we do great at libraries. We do really great at libraries. And so, and I'll say, and I'll put a plug in just because the food is the best food for exhibitors is Mississauga Comic Expo, which is usually run through their reference library. So again, just adjacent to just off GTA or just right off Toronto there. Big show, because Mississauga is huge, 1 million people. So like a lot of people, a lot of traffic. And they treat their exhibitors like they give them such great food. We've had like pizza. I know it sounds so silly to even say it out loud, but it's like pizza. Like the first year we did was like pizza, Chinese food, subs. It was just like everything. They're like, "What do you want?" We're like, because normally like you go get like a cup of coffee and a granola bar.
Yeah,
right. TCAF, nothing against it. Thank you so much. Supported by Crowdfundr. Thank you, Crowdfundr, by the way. But it was demonstrable when Jason and I first went. We're like, dude, you got to go to the green room and grab this food. So that's your plug for Canadian creators looking for shows. Grab your good food at the Mississauga Comic Expo.
I haven't really done any comic ones. I've worked with the Doug Wright Awards for a while, but I just took over 2019, so there was very quickly no opportunity to do that. So I'd like to do some in the future. Probably not to the U.S. I know that doesn't really make sense for us, but yeah, I'd like to go to a couple. And with Shadow Creek over the years, I did like Expozine in Montreal, which has a bit of comics. So it's a nice little one, and Canzine here in Toronto, which again, not all comics, but it's got a few, and those are both really nice festivals.
We also, Chris, I mean, not to sell the other events short, but like Comic-Con, Toronto Comic-Con, we do well. I mean, I get to sell some original art there, and it's nice to sell something with a couple zeros on the end.
Yeah,
I mean, our first few years of tabling at events, we're selling $5 items.
Yeah,
and it is hard to make a lot of money selling $5 items.
Yeah,
and you throw a couple bigger ticket things in there, and it all of a sudden takes the pressure off. Especially when you have to drop a few $100s just to pay the table fee. And then, at the Toronto Comic Con or Fan Expo, over 3 days, it's like $90 each in parking.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
when you put it that way, so,
Yeah.
but in terms of just reaching people and, reaching other goals, I found Fan Expo and Toronto Comic Con have been great for me personally and for us as a team. I often go into those things with goals other than monetary. For instance, like I'd want to get feedback from a particular creator on maybe the latest thing I've drawn, and people have been so generous. People I've met like Torontonian Michael Cho. I went to his table, and I when there was no crowd, I picked a dull moment, and I threw a comic book down and said, and here's some money, I'm going to buy some of your stuff, thank you, Michael, and is there any chance I can get some feedback? And he basically asked, like, how much pain did I want? What was my threshold going to be? And I said, truthfully, like, I'm not here to be patted on the head. I want to learn something. So I took a knee, and he just schooled me, and it was great. And he gave me a list of references like I needed to go look up. Like, you need to go read this, and then you need to go read that, and you need to go read that. And so having a goal to get that kind of feedback, or make a contact with someone that might pay off down the road in some way, that can be a really great goal for a person like me to have at an event that makes it incredibly valuable, despite the fact that I'm either earning a lot of sales or not.
Yeah.
And you might see William Shatner.
Yeah.
Maybe.
We've seen, it's so funny because those like that experience, like this is comics adjacent, but like when you go to those bigger shows and you're there in the morning for setup, right? Where people, so like no one's there. I mean, the only people there are people who are, the whatever setting up. So there's no fans there yet.
Artist Alley and the other
right.
vendors.
And so, but then some of the guests, are walking around because they're setting up too, right? Like they're going to their photo op, whatever it is. And so I think it was we did Niagara Falls Comic Con, which is also an interesting show too, because it gets a lot of cross-border traffic from the States, like just down there at Niagara Falls, and big fan culture show, and we had a great time. But we got there, we're setting up, and like we were near where the photo ops were, just around the corner, and so it was all these like 80s and 90s wrestlers, right? Who like 100% I grew up with, right? And we're like, oh, right? And like TV stars from the 80s. So it was like Marcy from Married with Children. Like, oh, Marcy from Married with Children. So there was just like, I know that sounds silly, but it's really funny because you have this like strange access point because you're all just setting up and getting ready for the day, day of work, because they're working too. It's just kind of this little, I find a little bit of a little cherry on top sometimes of these shows because you get access, and even within the creative space, like you're right, Jason talked to Michael and was great, and like right behind us last year at Fan Expo, because we were kind of like, there was like the pro wall and we were in Artist Alley, right beside was Arthur Adams.
Oh, wow.
And so we're just like, so you just like again, he's setting up and it's quiet. You kind of go over and, hey, I'm not bothering you. He's like, no, it's okay. And you're like, oh, can you sign this? Or and you get the time. It's like the bonus of the creator. You get the time with the people who you want to see, because they're not 500 deep of fans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. To add on to that story, just to make it personal for a moment, Arthur let me stand over his shoulder and watch him draw on someone's sketchbook. He was drawing an amazing, dark side portrait. And just to see this guy, execute his craft at the level at which he performs, something that 13-year-old me would have only dreamed to get to watch him draw. And he's so meticulous, and he was really, really, really nice. So there's a couple of those kinds of things that have happened because of being at these kinds of events. It's been a real treat.
Yeah, it's like those types of things happening on some level kind of remind you why you're even doing it to begin with.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that we're makers, there's a different permission there a little bit. Like I think he wasn't letting people without the badge go behind his table. But he had met me a couple times throughout the weekend in the mornings, and And so he knew that I was regularly coming by and saying hi. And I think he knew that I wasn't giving any creepy vibes. So
That's
it was
but
yeah, it was great.
and that's actually a really good point, because we use those opportunities too, to, as we were talking, this like this learning piece, but this journey to connect, right? So Jeff, we met at SPX
Yep.
last fall in Washington, and that was our first American show, and we had never crossed the border with their comics. We had never did anything like that. So at Fan Expo, which is about 6 weeks before SPX, I was engaging a whole bunch of American like comic pro writers who I like their stuff, and that would be the intro. And then I was like, hey, listen, we're actually crossing the border the first time. How do you do this? What do you do? Right. And like getting advice, like you should, where are you crossing? And will this work for me or this? So again, it is you're right. It's, as you know, your peers somewhat, you're in that space together as makers. And so, you can obviously share a kind word about the book you're loving as well, but also like, hey, let's actually need some advice. Like, what do you think about this? And nothing but I've certainly experienced that. Jason, I think you probably the same, is we've experienced nothing but collegiality when it comes to those things, which has been incredibly helpful to us.
Except for once. I was somewhere that was, I won't name names. I was at a life drawing session, not a class, but a session of artists hanging around in a studio doing a life drawing class. And there was a pro who has a name that I recognize because I have, seen their books on the shelf and whatnot. Like a mainstream artist. And they were complaining that people are always asking them what kind of tools they use, as if that's going to make them any better. And I thought to myself, like, what does it cost you to say, I use a Pentel brush pen, or I use a this? Like, what does that cost you to just give a person you add your experience to their database, And this individual was not nice about talking to other people about his precious tools. And other than that one individual, everyone has been incredibly nice. And I'd say they've been generous. Everyone's been very generous, especially the Canadians.
Yeah.
Similar thing at TCAP, I think, when you're doing your either your Friday night setup or your Saturday morning setup, and everyone's just kind of around. It's a really good time to just reconnect with people you don't see very often, or you only see at TCAP, or just just chat with people, or even meet some people you wanted to meet, whether it's a publisher or a creator, or people you didn't know you were going to meet. It's a nice little social, unofficial social time. And for me, I usually go half an hour early on Saturday just to hit people's tables quick before the crowd comes. But it's also a really good time just to kind of make some of those connections.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, kind of like circling back a little while, you're mentioning when you were at TCAF, you're selling some art and selling some stuff that's more than $5. Now that's something for crowdfunding campaigns. Also, that usually it seems that people who have stuff that's more than just their book, it's a good way to try to make a little bit more. Because I think we both did pretty well at SPX, but we were really grinding because like everything that I had also was like $5. And so have you found that there was anything that you've experimented with trying to sell that didn't work, or stuff that you're trying to augment your books with that did work?
Selling prints has been helpful for sure. They don't cost a lot to make on the print side. And they have a higher price point. I like jokingly will say, like, the comic book will have in it 24 pages plus a cover. So let's say that's 25 drawings. It sells 25 drawings reprinted for $5.
Yeah.
But a print is one drawing reprinted for $20. So it's interesting how value is different for everyone out there, and buyers want different things. But experimenting with prints has helped. Having original art out has helped for sure. I think having maybe a smaller print size will help, like for not just our book, for the new printing of Group of Seven and Most Secret Tale. We're going to a library like manga, 6x9 size as opposed to the traditional comic book size. But I think even having like prints, Chris, that are smaller as well, like that 9x12 or something a little smaller, people can sort of go through a little file and pick out the beautiful print they want. That might be a lot of fun too, but we'll see, maybe for MCAF.
Yeah, we're always seeing what everyone else is doing too, right? We're really curious, right? So even like our table mates, where we are, just like how are people, what are you selling really well? What's going on with your table? And having the multiple price points is, I think, key. But that comes with like, we started off with one product, right? Like one comic book and then a second comic book, right? So the having that, and then we learned really well with the print thing that I mean, if you're up for it and you enjoy like the fan printing, like, yeah, I'm gonna draw a Boba Fett or whatever it happens to be, and that also brings you joy. Like, don't do it because you think you just have to. But we were at a show at a Comic-Con, and a friend of ours, another indie comic creator, had his comics out, right? But then he had two prints on the table. It was just like an open, and one was a Venom and one was a Carnage from Spider-Man. And like, you can, if you love those characters or not, doesn't matter. Point is that like he was selling his comics, but like those are the things that people like, oh, and he just kept like just like $20, $20. And so it became this, we were just kind of like amazed because, he was selling a little bit of his indie comics, but he was selling these prints, and that was at least helping him to be there. It was helping him to be there and to cover those silly parking costs or those silly whatever, right? So maybe it's not the thing that he loves, but he enjoys, right? So I think what we found is that, like, having the different points, and with the crowdfunder, for example, like, you can get our book. We have different things. You can get some of the print copies of the comics at a lower price point. We have some, like Jason, you've offered some original sketches too, so that's like a higher price point. So we have found that it's interesting when I look at the data from the crowdfunder, it's not like all the new printing. Like that's like, I don't know, maybe 30% of it. Like people are buying little bits here, or they're just donating, which is an amazing thing to see. But or they're buying like the higher. They're like, you know what? I'm going to throw these guys X, and I'm going to get this sketch. Like I don't really need the book, or I already have a version of the book, or whatever. So that's the other thing too, is that because we're reprinting it, or not, we're creating new printing of this. I mean, a lot of the story is the same. So someone might be like, I've already got this story. What else do you have? It's like, well, we have all these other things. And we have found that to be, as I see the orders come in, it's interesting because it's not like the featured product is the new printing. And yet, people are going to all the other options too, being like, oh, $5 here, $20 here, whatever it happens to be. So I mean, I think advice-wise, if people are starting to think about doing a crowdfunder, like for sure have multiple price points, which was the advice we were given when we asked crowdfunder, right? Like have multiple price points, and don't be scared. Don't be shy to have some things that are worth the value that you're setting them at, because perhaps it's like original art, and that comes with a work involved and a value involved, right? And people are willing. That's the other thing I think too. We found with the campaign is, we're only a couple, 1 or 3 weeks in, but people are willing to support and pay the fees and donate. And, I mean, it's pretty incredible actually. So, don't be shy, don't be scared off by that. I think originally when we first started, we're like, oh, no one's going to pay more than X for this. And no, they will. And I don't mean that as like, a purely, capitalistic sentiment. I just mean that like, it's representative of the value of the product that you're putting.
Yeah, with my Tallow Creek project, I didn't have tiers. It wasn't that kind of project, so I decided it was just going to have to live or die by how many people actually wanted it.
Wow, nice.
And like you said, a lot of people bought it, but a lot of people just gave a lot of extra money as a donation, which was really nice to see. Some people gave a lot of money, so that was great. With the Doug Wright project, we did have some tiers. We had Seth is our designer on the book, so we had there's a signed by Seth tier. And
oh, nice.
But once, I mean, we really went gangbusters for the first couple of days, and then it really stalled to a degree that I felt was more than the usual stall. It wasn't moving forward for a few days, and I was getting worried. So we called in some favors, and we asked some artists to donate original art, and we created some incredibly high tiers for people, but still really affordable if you're a fan of Chris Ware or Dan Clowes or Seth. Still really cheap compared to what it was cost. I didn't want to do too much of that because I didn't want to fund the whole campaign with 6 pieces of art, because then you've only got 6 readers, and there's really not much point to
Mm-hmm.
make a book for 6 readers. So I did, but so it's a portion, but it won't be the majority, but it'll be an important portion, and it really helped. But and the other thing, when I put those tiers up in two parts, some last week, some this week. Some people came in and bought the art, but just the days that we released that art, we got a lot of other regular sales too. So just having that sale and that art, for whatever reason, I don't know, pushed the campaign in general. Maybe it's people just talked about it, share. I don't know why, but it helped in general as well. So maybe it'll be a quarter of our funding in the end, but it really helped overall.
Yeah, and once you get the goal to be able to pay the printer, then you can recoup the costs when you also have the rest of the books too.
Conan, do you find the like you'll put something out, like a post or an email or whatever, and it's like that's the next day, the 24 hours, you see more come in? It's like that, a constant reminder. Like it's finding that balance, right? Like you're not pestering, but you are reminding.
Yeah, I don't always post every single day. I'll take a day off occasionally. I was going to take the day off till I realized it was National Cartoonist Day, and I realized, oh, I've got to do a post.
We should probably do that.
Yeah, I should do that too.
Doug Wright, especially, just because he was a cartoonist.
Sure.
Yeah.
Not always, because you're like you've got to deal with the algorithms too. So I mean, maybe you do a post, nobody sees it, which is well, I did a panel with David and a couple other people at TCAF, and we're talking about this. It's like and Michelle, I think, was saying you can get it in your head that you're bugging people because you're posting too much, but 60% of people aren't seeing your posts anyway, so you're not really bugging.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to keep at it, and I mean, you still have to be conscious of annoying people with too many posts or losing followers or something as a result of posting too much. But I haven't compared too closely, but I'm sure we get a few at least off each post for sure.
We found it just interesting, like in the sense, like every week so far we sent out, we do the social media stuff, and then we sent out a mass email every week to our subscribers through our website, which is, let's say it's 300 people. It's not a crazy amount, but it's enough. But I find that when I send those out, like within, I usually send them at a certain time, and within like 12 hours of that, it's like it's like, oh, and it's interesting too, because like we provide them, and now like as you can provide them with updates where it's like we're here funded, then it's like the messaging changes where it's like, hey, help us get over that hump, like we're almost there, we're so close. And people respond, which is I'll put one out tomorrow, and it's further than it was the one I put on Wednesday, and so it's like just that close. So it's often, I find that we heard from a lot of folks too, like friends and colleagues and things, saying, oh yeah, I'm totally got to get to this, I'm totally going to do this. You're like, okay, cool, well, here's your reminder.
Yeah.
if you want to, right? Like if you're keen to do it, and obviously we appreciate the support regardless, but here's your reminder.
At the end especially, you really want to do a lot of posts at the end, just to let people know, this is it. It's not. I mean, if it's either way, whether it's fully funded or not, just 2 days left, 3 days left. If you haven't done it, now's the time to do it. Especially if you haven't met your goal yet, and you need those last few sales.
Because I feel like with a lot of people, it's really easy to see something that you're interested in, like you get a newsletter, or you get, see a post on Instagram or Facebook, and think like, oh, this is really great, I want to go support that, and but they're at work or they're in between something and they forget about it. And, those constant reminders, like they do, it does feel like a lot to pester people, but you kind of have to. Now, one thing I'm actually a little curious about, Jason and Chris, is both of you have like done a lot of shows, traveling around quite a lot. How has everything worked out, like on the financial side of that? Because I know that there's a lot of people who they're on the fence about if they can make the commitment to go to a lot of shows, because that is a time commitment and that is a money commitment. And how has that been working out for you, for anyone who might be on the fence about it?
It's been positive so far. And we kind of now have a sense after last year, especially, which was our biggest year at our biggest year of exhibiting to date. We now have a sense of like what our sort of high end is for book sales. And therefore then you can adjust like, okay, well, then if we can sell this many books and maybe this many prints and this much art or whatever, we can cover this much cost. So, and then there's other shows where, like SPX, for instance, where part of the benefit of going to the States and going to the Washington, D.C. area is to see what it's like. And, if we were two friends that took a golf weekend and we went to Virginia to go golfing, we're not making money, right? We're just spending, but it's still a quality weekend, with a buddy. So we look at it partially like this is something experiential. We're getting away from our respective families for a few days and having an experience, going on a little road trip with a pal, and we get to have the fun of being at an event like SPX. And we were 2 tables away from the legendary Dennis Kitchen. So that was pretty cool just to hear his voice, like, oh my God, that's Dennis right there, and talk to him for a minute. And he had, of course, art portfolio with Will Eisner art in it, like original Eisner pages. So I got to leaf through that and have my mind blown to, be near something that belongs in a museum.
Yeah.
So that was super special. So it's not always about what you get back in terms of monetary. Sometimes it's worth the expense and spending a couple $1,000s to make this happen. And if you earn back 1,200 or whatever it might be, sometimes it comes out. It's still a valuable experience. So we kind of, I think we've left it where maybe every other year we reach out to or branch out to something a little more costly. Like we maybe don't go every year to something like that, but every other. And then having those library shows that are local at Mississauga or in Whitby, Ontario. And then you offset the cost because you make a few hundred there and throw it into the kitty, and then you've got enough to sponsor your trip to maybe next time it's Emerald City, in Seattle, or maybe it's VanCaf or something like that, or Decaf outside of Halifax, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to be at Decaf this year.
Nice.
It's believe it's run by Caleb Johnson, who owns Strange Adventures, which is I think those stores are the best in Canada, I think.
I think you'd be hard pressed to find any store that's like significantly better. That's for sure. We're big fans of the Dragon in Guelph. It's Chris's hometown at the moment, and we love Jen and Amy there, and they've always supported us a lot. But I'll admit, like there's a box coming from Cal to my house as we speak. I mean, he posts so actively, or the guys at the shop, him and Dave and whoever else works there, I don't know. They post so actively on Instagram all these comics that I know I want. So I'm constantly messaging like, hey, put that aside for me, please. And every 4 months or so, a box arrives that is like, oh my gosh, it's so much fun. So much fun. So I'm a huge fan of Strange Adventures.
Great story.
Yeah.
Now, actually, that brings to mind. Have any of you tried to make much effort to distribute your books into stores, and how has that gone?
Mixed.
Yeah.
I'm going to be putting the Talbot Creek book in just a handful of stores. I mean, I have pre-existing relationships with some stores that carry magazines from the magazine, and I'll hit a few others. I've made the money back, so I'm not super worried about it, but I do want to get it out there. So yeah, we'll do a few stores. And Doug Wright, I mean, we're selling to retailers as part of the campaign, so that's been an important part of the campaign. So we give them a retail rate, and they'll commit to a certain number of copies. So I'm going to do a big push on retail next week to get it in.
That's a great idea.
That's a good idea.
Sure.
Maybe something we add.
Always learning.
Always.
With my last couple campaigns that I did, I found that the retailer support that I got from the handful of shops really did help a lot meet that bottom line at the end. even though you're selling them at cost, or you're making a little bit, but not as much because you're giving them their price so they can sell it. But yeah, that's people. Every person that I've talked to has a different approach to how they deal with talking to stores and getting their books actually on shelves, or even if that's the goal. So yeah.
Well, it's funny for us. It was the goal at the beginning. We were very keen to try and get our book into as many stores that would carry us as possible. And so we hit like the GTA up area hard. We sent stuff across Canada. We then tried to we were like, oh well, what about shops in the States? And so we kind of chose like Great Lakes adjacent stores, things that like were probably within an 8-hour driving distance from us in case something came up where we could go. But we also sent to California and New York, truthfully. And we got some, as Jason said, mixed. We were carried pretty frequently in a few stores. Whether it's like the Beguiling in Toronto or the Dragon here in Guelph, and some have been like really keen on it. But about 2 years ago, maybe, or 2 or 3 years ago, we kind of found that we were selling more either online or at shows than we were through stores. So I think we've maybe, as much as we still like our product in stores, we haven't. I think Jay, feel free to contradict me, but I feel like we haven't been quite as like hot and heavy about trying to get into stores as we were at the beginning. We've kind of maybe just trying to pivot it a bit to try and find other avenues, like for example, because of the educational component, like directly to schools, or we've been in we're in a few museums and things, because again we kind of fit that demographic. And so like I've tried to like get into like Parks Canada to be like, oh well, you should have us in your gift shop, right? And I still haven't found the right contact to do so. I don't know if anyone's listening out there.
And military museums.
Yeah, like stuff like other because of the nature, of Conan and but our books are like very much set in the First World War and in that area. So like there's that linkage. So like we found that like we're always trying to broaden the audience base. And I think we set out very much thinking like, oh yeah, let's get these in stores and go that route. And I think after doing it for a few years and trying really hard, it was like, well, there's other avenues too. So, just kind of diversify that a bit.
Well, the beauty
initially, oh, sorry, go ahead, Conan.
The beauty of a crowdfunding a project is that even though you still want to be in stores, it becomes less important because you've already reached a lot of your audience and sold them a book already. So it's not like that's for me is one of the best parts of doing things this way.
Right, agreed. When you think about just the price cut that you get selling one to a reader, one to a store, it seems silly to put your emphasis on the store instead of the reader when we have direct access to the readers. And it's just about growing, the pool of readers that we have access to through social media, through events and networking and things like Crowdfundr as well. So yeah, Chris, I agree with you. We are a lot less hot and heavy. But then also, like I said at the very beginning of this, we came in not knowing who the key players were. And I now, I have to be honest, I think I know every store in the GTA, and I know, do they sell Marvel, DC, and Image? Do they sell indie? What's their blend? Who's their target market that, that comes into that store? Who's rejected me because not being rude, but said like, I don't really think I can sell that. And who's embraced it? Like, I'll be honest, the Beguiling bought a box from us. They bought a box of 40 from us.
Wow,
and,
nice.
Knowing that we were, had this printing, and the pandemic was on, and Peter's like, take a box. Great. Here, it's fantastic. And Cal at Strange Adventures bought a substantial amount too. And at the Dragon, they bought a substantial amount. So those are the 3 stores that are on my top of list that I'll always, want to make sure they get our product, because they acted like they could sell it. I don't know if they actually did. I know Jen and Amy at the Dragon did really well selling our book. And that's just one store in one town. But the rest of the comic book landscape, they were really hurting, I think, in 2020 and 2021. So we also felt that it wasn't the ideal time to go asking to add to their workload. Yeah. And they earn so little off of that interaction. Like every form that the comic book store fills out, that's time. and they're making pennies off of the time they're spending talking to us. So it wasn't worth everyone's time to respond, and I really do get it. But for us, it was like, let's just then sell to, by hand and sell to readers directly, and it seems to be the right mix at the moment.
For me too, like where I'm not really concerned about making a profit. We're not looking to make profit, so I'm fine selling at cost. But when you go too hard on retail, then you've got postage if you're going outside of your,
Mm-hmm.
and that can get really expensive, especially like I'm doing big hardcover books. That can get really expensive to ship. So maybe the store pays for it, but again, that ups their price. And yeah, postage when you're doing your own distribution.
My dream would be that we get in a van
Mm-hmm.
and we'd go cross country and drop off comics at every store.
Mm-hmm.
Just do it. Just deliver them ourselves. It'd be so much fun. It'd be terrible. That van would stink. But it would be so much fun to make it easy for everybody. And we did have an opportunity to saddle up to a smaller publisher that offered us, diamond distribution for our book. But the rest of the deal didn't seem so good. But I would love it if people could order a book across Canada.
Mm-hmm.
That would be really cool. Maybe one day. I think they can order it just directly from us. They can order it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I keep thinking about other creators and what models they use to get their books out there. And the one that I can't help but come back to is just Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. And they're putting out 3 or 4 hardcovers a year, and they have their audience built, and every comic book store seems to push their book, and their fan base is just growing and growing every year because they make this unique thing, and they get to make the books that they love under their own terms. I'm like, that sounds good. I like that idea. Let's do that.
Yeah. Now, a lot of all these projects, they're pretty Canada centric. Have you been finding much? Basically, I'm wondering what your strategy was for getting stuff to people in the States, if at all, because I know that especially over the last 2 years, and especially in the last year, the shipping costs have become very crazy to send into the States from our end and from their end to get books to us. To the point that people I've noticed are not doing international shipping anymore. Some people.
I mean, I'm doing it on the campaign, but in terms of retail, everything I just said about Canada, you can double or triple that. Even I was doing the magazine. Even I only did 2 or 3 stores in the States because it's just not worth the cost of printing and shipping to send it down there. Sometimes I'd love to, but I'm not worried about it either because I don't think our product has as big a U.S. audience.
Mm-hmm.
I find that the sales that we do make in the States, there are sales that come in. It's there, and the one thing that intrigues us about that market, aside from it being 10 times larger than our domestic market or whatever it happens to be, is that there's like a lot of support for indie comics, right? There's a lot of people keen about. Oh, I think Jason's got to go. That's okay. There's a lot of support. And so we'll find that we'll be shipping books to California or Utah or wherever, and then people are into it. Oh, he's back. But you know what I mean? So like we won't ever say no. People want to pay the shipping. That's great. Great. It's there. The shipping's there. It's pretty clear, pretty open about it. But we have found that little by little we do these campaigns. We like grow the audience there, but it was really fun because at SPX. Like we had to like pitch the book in person, right? So like our pitch changed. Our pitch changed from like, hey, there's these Canadian soldiers on this mission to save the world, to like, hey, we have this book and it's about action and adventure, and and even the language. Like, so in Canada and the Commonwealth, it's known as the First World War. Well, it's called World War I in the States. Like it's and that's a small distinction, but it resonates with different audiences, right? So even though we kind of use it interchangeably in Canada, generally speaking, it's the First World War. So like. And also then you take, because of the historical nature of that conflict, like the United States does not have a popular memory of that conflict as much as they do of World War II. So there's like
there's no pop culture either.
Yeah, there's like a whole different different marketing pitch that Jay and I thought up of just to engage with that audience on a book that arguably is so Canadian,
Yeah.
right? Because of the nature and the content. So, but we also found there's the audience is there to support indie comics. And it's just trying to find those avenues that aren't too cost prohibitive from the shipping, if possible, to kind of to leverage it. That's what we found anyway.
Right. We over the pandemic as well, I engaged quite a bit with a particular group of comic readers and cartoonists online through Facebook and through Zoom and YouTube. And the group is like really hungry for indie comics. So we sold a fair number of books just to people from this particular group, this community online. And that was a great way to also talk to other creators and indie cartoonists and shop managers and owners during the pandemic and take temperature of the industry south of the border, and the buying community south of the border. But for us dealing with the States, they don't have First World War as part of their curriculum. There isn't this broader interest outside of comics for a comic book about the First World War and a bunch of Canadian soldiers. Where in Canada, we can get people who are students just in grade 9 and 10 to read it, even though they might not be comic book collectors. So so it really does, even though it's like 10 times the population, it's just the niche market in the States. Where in Canada, it really can go across the board. We get sometimes grandparents reading it and we get grandkids reading it, whether they're into comics or not. It's sort of like an interesting artifact that it kind of sits in multiple worlds, but not in the States.
But yeah, no, that's good. Really, there's stories about Tim Truman selling Scout at gun shows, and
Right.
There's a lot to be said for basically putting your comic and selling it in non-comic settings, because that's also the only way the industry is going to grow. Also,
right. Now, that's a whole nother thing with the comic book industry and its ever diminishing 40 plus Wednesday Warrior market. I'm a really big fan of the idea of that Tim Truman at a gun show. Just that I love the idea of us being the only comic book at a non-comic book kind of thing. That to me, I think that it's really interesting. I think we'd really stand out there. And that's one of the things I like about us being at the fan focused ones, because we're indie, and then at the indie things we have a couple fan things. So our style is a little more mainstream, in the fact that it's a like over the top action and adventure story. So it fits a mainstream audience, but the subject matter is definitely not mainstream, right? There's no capes yet, and it's not colorful on the interiors. So I like the going zagging when everyone's zigging. I'm a fan of that.
I found
It's
that
interesting.
I found that with my magazine at some point, at a certain point too, where I would, if we had a theme issue or something like that, I could find another market that I wouldn't, or a fair where I wouldn't normally go to, and that one issue would sell that like we would do an all comic issue every once in a while. I get a table of TCAP that year, which I wouldn't normally do, but people would buy that one issue that wouldn't normally buy the magazine. So yeah, that's a great idea for people in all areas for sure.
Yeah, it's you can be the person who's like in the sea of everyone else like you, or the only person who is different from everyone else, and Now, Conan, you did run a magazine for a long time. Did you find that, because you also mentioned that it was a bit of a different beast tackling books versus doing periodicals? What did you find from your experience doing the magazines that you were able to carry forward into what you're doing now?
I mean, probably a lot, and then specifically, a lot of the skills, editing and production and design and printing. There's a lot of carryover there. Because I was dealing with cartoonists in the magazine too, I came over the years to have a lot of connections in comics and just know a lot of illustrators, meet people that, I've always been a comic fan, but maybe I met a lot of other people that might not have met otherwise. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. It's just it's bigger and you sell it a little differently. So there was a lot of carryover, like almost everything. It was really, if I'd never published anything and sat down to do a 400-page book, yeah, I mean, I can go back and look at my first magazines and see what the learning curve was, because
Yeah.
so it would look as bad as those.
Well, that's great. Now, also, I think one last thing that we could see, because we kind of talked about it a little bit, but for people at home, what have you been finding in terms of, it's going to be different because every project is different, but in terms of marketing and finding your audience, what do you feel like has been the most helpful thing in finding your direct audience? Like, there's a lot of people out there to buy comics, but how have you gone about trying to find the people to buy your comics?
Well, I mean, for us, I mean, we don't sell comics like
Yeah.
but our book's a very niche book, so we're trying to find that niche. I mean, not just necessarily people that knew it, because most of them are dead, but just people that just appreciate that kind of old school cartooning. If you like Peanuts, you might like this kind of thing. So just finding our niche, and aiming at that niche and trying to broaden that niche as much as possible and bringing as many people into it.
Mm.
I think the thing that's probably helped us the most is being at the events. Would you say, Chris?
Yeah, getting ourselves out there. I'd also say that just seeing what sticks, right? Throwing a whole bunch of the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
We've really engaged at like all avenues, because we don't have the answers and we didn't have any data to go on, and so we needed to understand what was out there. And I think being at the shows is probably like the visibility thing, I think, is key. Like, I think like you can market all you want on social media, which of course we also do, but I think that in person, that that tangible nature of in-person connectivity is not to be overstated. Like, I think it is, I think, the thing that has probably grown our audience, because you get to meet us in person, we get to meet you in person and form that relationship, right? The one thing that we've done we do the odd classroom workshop here and there, and people ask the questions about the comic and the content, but also about just like the business behind trying to do this, right? And one thing we say is that you can blow us away on your social media numbers, right? You can do that. Doesn't mean people are buying your comic. It just means that people are following you on Instagram. That's all it means.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you can only take that for whatever value it is. But we find that getting out there and growing it in person we found to be the most successful. And I'm sure people are able to be super successful using other streams, but definitely getting out there. And we're fortunate enough that because we live in the GTA, there are so many opportunities for it to happen. Now you got to be like, we got to be choosy, because often there's price points involved, but that goes to your question about traveling and trying to find the value of exhibiting in different locations. But because it's there, and because most things are a couple hours drive for us, and because we have a product that can speak to different audiences, like, we try to hit up as much as we possibly can, just to grow it organically. And I think that's been the thing for us, for sure.
I think it all helps. They all feed off each other.
Yeah.
Social media. I mean, if in person's great, but hopefully your social media helps bring people out to see you in person too. And
right. Yeah. Tells people where we are. Yeah, absolutely.
Can't have too many avenues. It's all good.
Yeah, it's like there's no one solution. There's a lot of different solutions that all amalgamate together to,
Right.
I started long enough ago that I can speak to, like, we started in 1997, and there was barely email back then. And when we launched just our email list in 2000, that was a game changer. Like, all of us, we get so many more people coming out just from sending out to a small email list, when before our avenue was putting an ad in a local paper or postering or something.
Right.
And then, that grew, and then the social media came. And social media wasn't the biggest game changer in terms of making money, but it certainly gets the word out more and brings more people out. So but people actually also love coming out to our events, and that's a really important part of the whole mix too. So yeah, it's all helped me over the years. It's all been great.
The one that's helped me the most, just specifically, is like just drawing something that's good looking.
Mm.
When I draw something good, I notice dramatic results, and the attention it gets out there online, and the sales increase. So tapping into something, getting an iconic image, it's the first thing that someone sees in 10 seconds. So the other thing we've done that's really helped us is we've done 3 monthly Instagram comics, where for a month, for the 31 days of October or whatever it was, or in this case it was December, 31 days of December just passed in 2022, every day we would release 3 panels of a story, and the story and was quickly written and quickly drawn. That's the sort of the spirit of it. Was done in under an hour. So they're energetic and spontaneous, and we did that 3 times. And then by the end of the month, we've got our 93 panels, which is enough for a comic book. And then, this time for our crowdfunder, we've added the most recent one called Hunter's Moon, Peregrine's Hunter's Moon. We've added that to one of the rewards. So it's been fun. We've got 2 others we did in the past, and again, like they're really dashed off. Like, there goes my phone. So they're not very polished, especially this one. That cover is very, very loosey goosey. But we just put together elements of the book after the fact. But it's been fun having these adjacent narratives, and like we get a ton of followers for the month, and they usually stick around after. So that's been a good way to promote our main products and reach new people for sure. Yeah. And learn.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way to experiment and put yourself out there in a way that doesn't really cost you much other than your time. And it's a way for you to learn and get better and practice your craft, and also for people to see you. It's great.
Yeah. And within the cartoonist community, the people that I know, like it seems to get their attention more than I would have expected. Like there's you're trying something new. You're experimenting. I'm curious about your experiment. And that's sort of like a way in for a lot of people.
It checks a lot of boxes for I think a lot of creative people who were in our circle, because it's you're creating every day. There's a spontaneity and energy about it that isn't in like a long form draft of a comic that you're kind of workshopping back and forth. And at the end of it, you get a physical product and a digital product, which you then can take to shows. And we just do a small print run, and they sell out. We just say, hey, and then but then we sell the digital files, and be like, yeah, we're gonna put them all together in an omnibus at some point and sell that. Like it checks so many little boxes for us. And to Jason's point too, because this is an everyday thing, and you can read it for free, for that month, and then we'll take it down. But you can read it, like people stay, people's like get on board, and then they stay. So, and we found that it's a different audience. Like we have the product, we say like, here's the story arc of our peregrines, number 7, 8, 9, and people, okay, and here are these little one shots that we do. And you see people flip through, and they're just like, people are drawn to different things. Like some people like the energy and spontaneity of having like a choose your own adventure, every day, while other people like the long form, the narrative over 4 issues, right? So it gives us that variety again of product, even though it's the same product, ostensibly. So we found it's been pretty helpful. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah, I've done my own little comic strip on Instagram. It's like an unlicensed Mickey Mouse noir comic, but I think that I bit off a little bit more than I could chew by trying to make it over 300 strips. So I kind of got about 150 strips deep, and now it's a hole I need to dig myself back out of.
I thought you were going to say a bit off more than you because Disney came a knocking.
Right.
Yeah. No. People always ask, and I always say that if they want to knock down my door, then I'll talk to them. And I'll stop if they tell me to, but they haven't yet. And Mickey Mouse is public domain in Canada, the original like Steamboat Willie type one, and that's the one I'm working with. So that's the other thing.
Steamboat Itchy.
Yeah. But yeah, this is great. I know Chris and Jason mentioned that you have other things you have to head off to. Yes. But yeah, this was really great. Thank you all so much for coming down and hopping on the call and sharing all of your your collective knowledge. Is there any thing you wanted to leave with before we go?
Yeah, Group of 7 ML secret sale.
Projects on crowdfunding.
Yeah,
exactly. Check out our book on our projects on Crowdfundr. I'm looking forward to seeing Conan's for sure. And I've been following, in the distance on social media, was following Tattle Creek and a couple of the artists that contribute. So I'm looking forward to checking out your campaign. I have been irresponsible and not diving too deep into what everyone else is doing, but now you have inspired me. And of course, the Doug Wright book. That's really cool.
Oh, excellent. Appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Me too.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention that Doug Wright book. That is really cool. One of my areas of interest is Canadian comic history, and there's a lot of very important, really big, really influential people that no one knows about just because they lived and operated in Canada. So yeah, you're doing the Lord's work.
And 19% to go. Get over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. let's all help each other out, eh? Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's perfect. But yeah, thank you all so much, and we'll talk again, I'm sure.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Take care.
All right. See you later.
Bye-bye.